Yo, welcome Diablo 4 enthusiasts. In today's video we are doing our first tier list. But wait, don't turn off yet. I know what you're thinking, another tier list video on a game where we have only reliable infos until level 25. I promise you this one will be different. I have done a ton of theory crafting and digged really deep into the endgame that is already available. I have calculated all the different scaling potentials of what we already know. And this tier list is only going to be the base of a regular updated version based on the patch cycles of the game. So you can always stay up to date on every patch. You get all the informations. You will have a central hub in the Discord where you can always stay up to date. You have your builds, you have your guides accordingly. So it will be different. But now let's jump right into it. So we are going to rank our classes by 5 main categories that give you the best idea on where the class is excelling and where it may have some downsides. So we're going to look at level speed, farm speed, build variety, so how many different builds you are able to play that are actually potential. We are going to look at the skill cap that you need to actually pull off the class, and we're going to check out if it's playable, really nice and hardcore or not. And only for this first tier list, we are also looking at the end game potential, at the scalings and all this kind of stuff that's currently possible and available. And later on for the upcoming tier list, this category will obviously be removed. So let's take a look at the level speed, where we are starting with the Barbarian. I would give the Barbarian a Z here. Many people have been complaining about it. The start is really slow. He doesn't deal a lot of damage. He is not really tanky. You have to be careful to not hit an early death with the Barbarian by just not being able to dodge anything properly. It's highly recommended to have a well usage of your new evade that you can do via spacebar every 5 seconds. If you master this, Barbarian in the early game will not feel as weak. At least you don't need to be that tanky. But we will see that Barbarian class excels at other places on the game later on. And then next up, the Druid. He is the worst early game character so far. He's even slower as the Barbarian, and this is due to his resource generation being so poorly, and it feels really clunky to do. And yeah, overall, it was not a nice experience playing Druid at all. Then next up, the Necromancer, the crowd's favorite, and there's a reason why it was so popular in the beta. The summons early on are giga strong. You have 6 skills, and then on top of this you have the Corpse Explosion for massive AoE. Like, the Necromancer has everything he needs to be top notch at leveling. Really good early on. Then we're having the Rogue. He has some nice AoE, especially if some legendaries can buff your flurry skill, for example, for a bigger AoE radius. He's a bit slower when we're talking about single DPS, but the time he uses there to kill like a high health monster, he makes up with his mobility for it, so he can dash so much. It's yeah, a really solid A here for the Rogue. And the Sorc is pretty similar. For him though, it's like the AoE damage is pretty similar. He has a bit higher 1v1 DPS. So for example, Chain Lightning early on hits like a truck. It's crazy against bosses. And then paired with the Teleport, not as strong as the dashes, but still some decent mobility here. Now if we're looking at farm speed, so farm speed means when you actually got a bunch of legendaries and you got your build going and you're trying to start min-maxing. There, surprisingly, many people have been hating on the Barbarian, I know it, but if you look at some footage of Whirlwind Barbs, as soon as they've gotten some gear, their movement speed is extremely fast, they are whirling through everything, and like 3 or 4 shotting elite packs, like it's ridiculous, really strong for a farming build. Then the Druid, not as bad. One when we're talking about the level speed, as soon as you get some legendaries, he is fine. He even got some crazy combos with pulverized landslide that can go almost to one-shotting and is fairly sufficient. There's also some builds regarding the werewolves that can one-shot elites, but he has no real movement, and the skill casting is really clunky, so you cannot go with the flow here and play a proper fluent kill speed. Then the Necromancer, solid A. He got the AoE, he got the single target. The only thing he's lacking is the movement, and that's why he's, for example, falling off if you're looking at the rogue. If he is geared, he got it all. He got the damage, he got the dashes, the mobility, and yeah, it's just great. And this is where the Necromancer in comparison is lacking, and the Sorc can keep up with the rogue here fairly easy. We have already talked about it. Sorc is pretty similar. You have AoE, you have single target, you have high mobility, you have the possibility to actually skip a part of the map by teleporting over edges, which sometimes can be even faster than having like multiple dashes on the rogue. So fairly strong here. If you're looking at build variety, this tries to summon up the amount of builds you're able to do. And here the Barbarian is not doing that great. And the reason for this is not that there's still no different playstyles. It's just that shouts are currently so strong that they basically take up your bar, and you can only adjust a real small average of skills. And this, results in not too many crazy different builds. If we're looking at the Druid, I would say he is one of the classes with the most variety, like all the shape-shifting he has, werewolf, werebear. He can do so many different combos. He has so many legendaries around skills that allow him to go for different perks, like pulverize, almost one-shot, landslide, almost one-shot, werewolves, we've talked about it, like so many different combos that will be viable here, and I'm pretty sure it's going to be even more in the future. The Necromancer, when we're talking about build variety, is probably the worst. His summons, they take up space, basically, right? And besides the summons, you don't have too much to put on your bar. You have your Bone Storm, you have your Blood Mist and stuff. It's like 4 or 5 skills that are really good. The rest is almost not used. So lack of build variety, but probably one of the classes that has the highest fan factor if we would take this into consideration. If we're looking at the rogue, if we're talking about damage skills, he doesn't have too many options to build around it, but as an assassin, he has a lot of utility skills, defense, support skills and stuff like this, that he can use and make the char feel a lot different when you're playing it, because it actually goes directly to your playstyle. So this is something I personally would really like. Then the Sorcerer has the passive with the enchantment slots, where you can basically, all the skills you have, you can put into a slot that will then allow you to have a certain passive, and you can build builds just around those passives from the enchantments. And in the beta, you only had 1. Later, you will have 2 enchantment slots. So this will give you a insane variety of builds that are going to be viable. And I think as a theory crafter, Sorc might be the most fun class, because you can try out so many different things without having to switch a character. Now, next up, let's talk about the skill cap that you need to play a certain class. I would say on Barbarian, the skill cap is average. Like, you should know what you're doing. If you're keeping your buffs up and you're dodging the melee attacks, it is a bit of a challenge, but it's not that crazy. So it's similar with the Druid. He's also melee, and yeah, he is a bit more forgiving if you miss a dodge with like Earthen Bulwark and stuff like this. So he makes up with the tankiness. If we're looking at the Necromancer, I would say it's probably the most brain-dead class, probably also the reason why it's a real favorite of the crowd. It's easy to play, you can own the game with your skills, you can, you have the feeling to be really powerful, and this is what a lot of people are looking for. So if you're looking for a class that makes you feel really powerful, even though your gear is not that good, I would highly recommend Necromancer. Then next up is the Rook, which is alongside with the Sword, the classes that I think require the most skill cap. The Rook, especially with his imbuement, has you need timing, you need positioning, you need to make sure you have your stacks ready before you go in, stuff like this. So really nice. And the other thing that makes it a high skill cap is he is really, really squishy. So I would say out of all, the Rook is the hardest class to play, and then followed up by the Sword. And I don't mean like a Hydra build Sword that just runs around, places Hydras, and then basically AFKs running around in a circle. I'm talking about builds where you actually need to perfectly time your cooldown to get the maximum efficiency, to get your damage reduction when we're talking about melee swords and stuff like this. So the skill cap for the really high-end builds is high, but what makes the class great is you can play it with like lower potential builds and still be fine. So this should not mean that Sorg needs a really high skill cap and you shouldn't play it if you're like new to the game. I think Sorg has a skill range from really easy to really hard to master, and this makes this class so great. Now let's take a look at the hardcore suitability right there. I think Barbarian and Druid are pretty similar here. They can be really tanky if you build them into fortify options. If you don't overextend and you know your limits, you're really rarely going to die. If we're looking at the Necromancer, I would say it's more of a B, because he's lacking mobility, which makes repositioning really hard. And one of the biggest reasons why you die in hardcore is usually due to a CC chain, something like this. And if you don't have anything up to reposition to get out of there, this can be leading to your death. And we've already talked about the high skill cap of Rook. So I would give Rook also a B, because the skill cap is really high. And he is extremely squishy. This is not a good option, but if you're really experienced and you're really good, I would say this can also go into an A to an S because of the mobility you have. And now the Sorcerer, I would give it an S here. It's currently the only class that has a cheat death, which is basically like, in comparison to the other classes, a free death in hardcore if you proc the Flame Shield as an enchantment slot. But the opinions about cheat deaths are splitted. Some people say it's good, others say it's destroying hardcore really hard, cause like where's the feeling? And especially the combination of a cheat death and the teleport scroll feels weird. I am seeking a challenge in the game, so I would prefer if they would remove the cheat death from the enchantment and make hardcore a real option, and like the real feeling. There's no way to skip your death or whatever. Just like if you're doing a mistake, you get the punishment and your character is fully gone. And now let's take a look at the category that we will only have in this tier list. This is the endgame potential. It's based on me theory crafting, watching all kinds of guides, content that is currently being put out by so many great YouTubers. And yeah, here I would say that Barbarian probably has one of the highest potentials in the late game, just due to them being able to have more legendary slots and therefore a lot more scaling. And this is also, it will make them farm a bit longer, but I don't think that the legendary effects of the Barbarian are currently balanced out to accompany for him having more legendary stats. So as long as we're not seeing a balance patch here, I think Barbarian is going to rock the late game, especially with his farming speed. Yeah, it's going to be pretty crazy. If we are looking at the end game potential, we have been hating a bit on the Druid, right? Regarding level speed, farm speed and stuff like this. If you're going into end game, there are some crazy legendary power combos at the moment. They're really hard to get. They require a lot of legendaries to pop off, but once you have them, they're really great, and the scaling for Druid only goes upwards. So in the beta, we didn't have access to special passes, stuff like this, so the scaling only goes upwards, and I would put him just slightly below the Barbarian here. The Necromancer, this may surprise a lot of people since it was so popular, but I think many people are getting blinded that the Necromancer is so great early on, right? And they think like it's going to stay like this all the way. But especially the summons, like skeletons, they are falling off in the late game. And if you sacrifice them, you're only getting small benefits from the Book of Dead. So I'm pretty sure that Necromancer is going to be the class with the worst scaling in the late game. And this paired with the lack of mobility is going to be making many people that are going to start Necromancer change their class fairly soon if they're starting to face some major issues. Then next up, the Rook. I would say it's pretty similar to the Druid. If you're looking for some damage monster with high risk, but like extreme high damage output, I would go with the Rook. And the Rook is, it's basically your classic class cannon that used to be the Sorg, but the Sorg now, I would say he is by far able to compete with the Barbarian in the S tier. He has it all. He has like also all those different builds. He can go range, melee, high DPS, tanky with all the barriers. Like everything you want is in his pack. So, and the scaling is nice. You have the double enchantment slots to boost. There's just not a lot negative to say about the Sorg in the current state. And I'm pretty sure we cannot make like a perfect overview, but I will try to keep this tier list updated. As I've already said, with every patch we're going to make adjustments to the tier list, so you're always up to date. And now let's finish off the video with a final ranking of the classes, what I think you should be choosing when the beta launch, when the release actually happens. So my personal favorite is the Source, by far, followed up by the Rook. I think those are both going to be S tier, then followed up by the Barbarian right here. And then we are having on the B slots, the Necromancer and the Druid. But we've got to say, all classes are playable. Many people have been hating on the Druid. Maybe you should watch my video about is Druid and Barbarian really that bad? Because this may shine a different light on the potential that has not been discovered yet in the beta for the Druid. I'm saying all classes are playable. If you're someone that likes to have the highest numbers, that likes to compete, right, I would try to pick a Source, Rook or Barbarian. And if you're just someone that enjoys the game, just play what you like the most, the gameplay. Don't get bothered by tier lists, just enjoy the game as it is. Thank you very much for watching this video all the way to the end. If any questions still rush through your mind, feel free to comment below the video. For more in-depth questions and to stay up to date on the most OP builds, I recommend joining my Diablo 4 Discord community. If you want to support the content creation process, feel free to purchase a channel membership